Anyway, we now have the accurate name for Fly Amanita. He is the SoPo hero, known for his amazing play with the ice climbers. Currently, the #1 ice climbers in the world. I'm allowed to say that, right? I mean, Wobbles would have been the #1 player after Evo, but then he immediately quit. Do you feel like you've caught up to him, or you're about to catch up to him? Where do you feel you are in relation to Wobbles?
I still feel substantially worse in a lot of regards. I'm a lot less consistent than he is. So even if I am the best active title, it's not. I mean, the best active ice climbers player, which is debatable. It's not a title that would really mean much to me.
All right. I was just saying because I don't know. I have a bunch of other questions that I wanted to ask before actually jumping into Smash, but do you feel like you've been in his shadow? I mean, you just said that you don't really care about the title so much as, like, I guess, results or just getting better. Is Smash like a personal thing, or are your goals in Smash for results, or how do you what are your goals in Smash?
A lot of it is just get better and try to reach a point where I'm content with my play. And generally speaking, as it is nowadays, I tend to really dislike watching myself play. I feel like I make lots of really bad decisions. I'd like to at least be at a level where I can watch a video of myself and say, yes, this makes sense.
What about your decisions don't make sense? Is it because you do have a sort of strange way of playing? Like, you'll watch people a lot of times and you'll let them just make their own mistakes sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't work out, but a lot of times it freaks people out and they play right into your hands. Is that
a lot of it is just either falling for tricks the other person has, not adapting to something quickly enough, or just picking stuff that doesn't have a good risk versus reward ratio. That's something I'm generally okay about, but I still mess it up more often than I would like to. Like, sometimes I'll be in a situation where I feel that there's pretty clear good decision, yet I might on the fly opt for something else and it might not work out so well. So yeah, I still feel like my decision making could use quite a bit of work.
Okay. Is this something that because when I think of decision making and analyzing your decisions, I'll usually think about watching your own play and analyzing that. But you say you don't do that. So how do you analyze it, like after each match, or?
Your mic dipped in volume about halfway through that question, so I didn't catch all of it.
Okay, I was just asking, when you're analyzing your own play, is this something you actively do, or is this something that because you just said you don't watch your own videos, or you don't like to, do you do this as you play, or how do you analyze yourself?
How do I? I usually, most of the time, I'm able to remember how matches went. If something went really wrong, then I will just go and look at the video afterwards and see, okay, what am I doing that just caused me a ton of problems? And on the other hand, I would say, okay, what is the other person doing that's working well for them? What could I do in response to this? Most of the time, I feel like I'm reasonably able to just remember things after the set. But in case I feel like I'm at a loss, then I will just say, okay, I'm just going to go back, dig up this video, and write a bunch of stuff in the text file.
Oh, yeah. And, so you do take your own notes, like you write stuff down?
Yeah.
Do you think that's something that a lot of players should do, or is it just like it works for you?
Well, it's always convenient to have this stuff written down just because memory isn't always the most reliable thing. So I do think it's convenient. I don't know if I would necessarily say it's something most players should do, but there's certainly no harm in doing it.
That's true.
So I can't see much of a reason not to, at least, aside from the fact that it takes a bit of effort. But it's not even really that much effort. It's mostly just doing stuff you normally do and then just documenting it in a form other than just memory, which is unreliable.
Yeah. So I'm sorry I just jumped straight into the Smash questions. I can't contain myself. So I did want to ask a few introductory questions because we see you on stream a lot, and we're both mods over on Reddit's subreddit for Smash Brothers, r/Smash Bros. But I'd like to ask a little bit about yourself. You're currently pursuing a PhD, I believe, or is it a master's in mathematics?
Well, I already have a master's.
Okay.
At the moment, I'm not really doing that much. I'm not working at this particular moment in time. I need to find out what exactly I would write a dissertation on, because I was in grad school for a while, just considered a few options, and at the end of the day, just wasn't really sure which of these I really liked. There wasn't any one thing I was really terribly enthusiastic about, so I thought I would just take a little bit of time off just to think about that, read some books. I'm currently just rereading a book on number fields, also rereading a couple texts on p-adic analysis. Just want to see, okay, is there something out here that I actually do find just really actively entertaining to work on?
Right.
And if not, then I'll just say, okay, well, what do I like the most anyway? Let's go with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely something algebra or analysis related. I feel like even though I tend to enjoy algebraic stuff more than analysis, in some ways I feel like I'm better at analysis. So I'll just have to see how things work out.
All right. Do you feel like there's any kind of parallel to how you think about mathematics to how you think about Smash Brothers? I know when I was in college, I pursued an engineering degree, and I enjoyed math quite a bit. I always felt like there was a similar line of thinking where you're very analytical, but at the same time, you often have to get very creative, and there's no one solution. So I was wondering if you feel there are any parallels that perhaps your interest in math has I don't know, helped your Smash play, or is a similar appeal or anything like that? Not to relate everything to Smash Brothers, of course, but...
Well, I can definitely say there are some very minor similarities. I don't think they're actually very substantial, though. I guess in general I feel like I'm confident in my reasoning, but reasoning in Melee is generally, or at least the majority of the reasoning that I use in Melee is quite different than the reasoning I use in math. In math, I mostly use deductive reasoning, just given some axioms or assumptions, what can we prove is undeniably true from there. And Melee is a lot of induction, which is just saying, okay, let's, based on what we observe, what is likely to be true. So it's like, okay, I see this sort of thing happening a lot, or this sort of thing working a lot, maybe this is a good response to it, maybe this is something I should be continuing to do. I would say in that regards, if anything, it's probably closer to one of the physical sciences, one of the sciences that tries to make actively tries to make claims about reality. You use induction a lot in those. It's not something that, at least in the sort of math I tend to do, it's not something that tends to come up a lot. So it does definitely feel very different than whatever I tend to research now. It's not too similar for me.
All right. It's interesting. So I have to ask about the origin of your name. It is, of course, a mushroom. Is that the mushroom that is pictured for your Skype
yes,
picture?
It is.
And how did you decide to go with Fly Amanita? It's very catchy, but
well, let's see.
Yeah.
Around 2006, I became aware of competitive Smash, and well, let's see. And at the time, sort of being good at Smash was part of my identity. It was the best of my group of friends. And then when I realized I was bad, because I just watched the Kevin vs. Bomb Soldier video, and it became obvious that there's a lot of stuff I didn't know. It's very important to me to say, okay, I better actually become good. I'm not good. Well, let's fix that. And so one of the first things I do is say, okay, where online can I go to find resources and talk to people? And I came across some random Nintendo forum. I think it was called Insider. It wasn't a good place by any means, but I didn't know that at the time. And so it says, okay, this is a Nintendo forum. So I think, okay. Well, there are a couple things. For one thing, I was a huge Mario fanboy at the time. It was throughout high school in general. This was right after high school ended. So I wanted something that was kind of, as a name, I was thinking, okay, I want something that's vaguely relevant to Nintendo, probably Mario in particular, but not in an immediately obvious way. So I don't recall how I came across it, but I learned that the mushrooms in the Mario games are, in terms of appearance, based on the Amanita muscaria mushrooms, which are red and have white spots. And that has a few other names. The most common name is Fly Agaric, which is what I am on Twitch. And another common one is Fly Amanita. And I just liked the sound of that, so I decided to go with that. So the name is just essentially a Nintendo reference, more explicitly a Mario one, even though I'm not really much of a Nintendo fanboy anymore, nor do I even really play Mario at all. But yeah, that's what the name is.
So you said you got into competitive Smash in '06.
Yes.
Everyone has like a love at first sight kind of moment. You said you watched Ken versus Bomb Soldier, and then the whole world opened up. Was that that's when you jumped into the game? Did you start? How'd you learn about tournaments? What was your first tournament experience?
I could give several different answers to that because I just started. Well, at the time I was going to college well, this was right before, but this was the summer before I started college, and I started at Harvey Mudd College, which is a tiny engineering school in Claremont. It's one of the Claremont colleges, if people know those. And there were people there. There weren't a lot of great ones. There were lots of okay people. So I did just participate in some little dorm tournaments and stuff like that, where I was just playing against people at the other colleges, and I was one of the better people there. In about 3 months, I think I became the best person there. And let's see. The next answer I can give outside of random dorm events is this one random game store tournament that some guys found online. It was a terrible tournament. It was just a bunch of people who don't really know anything about the game. The guy running the tournament first tried to do it on one GameCube on tournament mode. Eventually, some guy got angry and pulled his controller out rather violently and knocked the GameCube down. And then we actually, at that point, got a few setups and most people left. From that point on, it wasn't too bad, except there weren't really many noteworthy people there. DSF was there, but DSF went to everything, and he won. It was still sketchy. It was single elimination. As for the first tournament that I would actually call a real thing, as in a legitimate tournament in most senses of that word, that would be a tournament at Claremont McKenna College, hosted by an old Chic player named Atul, and that was in his dorm suite, or rather his apartment suite, just a couple of apartments gathered together. They got a bunch of setups there, and if I recall correctly, I did okay, but not amazingly. I played DSF again and lost. Well, I played DSF at the Game Store one too. And I played him and lost, and I think I played Fabian in Losers a little while later in Losers and lost to him. So I don't think Fabian's a name people outside of SoPo would know too much. He was a Chic and Peach player who for a long time was famous for being bad, and eventually he became okay. So
what a biography.
Yeah, and then at this point I just wasn't happy with how I was playing. I said, okay, I think I'm just going to wait for a Brawl. I'm just going to do Stadium stuff in the meantime. So I did a bunch of Stadium throughout the summer of 2007. But then when I came back to college in late 2007, some of the people I played with before, now more at Claremont McKenna, and Pomona than Harvey Mudd, even though I was previously at Harvey Mudd. And they actually had started going to tournaments, so I said, okay, why not? So late 2007, I started regularly going to things, and generally placed kind of in the middle of the pack, or closer to the upper end, but kind of okay for a while.
Did you always play... Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go on, I didn't really have much else to say.
I was going to ask if you've always played Ice Climbers, or when that became a thing.
No, I definitely did not. Well, when I first started learning the advanced techniques, or at least the ones I hadn't already figured out, I already did short hop aerials, ledge hop aerials, I already figured out how to wave dash, and I learned how to do a lot of things before I became aware of competitive play, but I wasn't really all that good at a lot of it. But when I was frantically trying to pick up on at least how to look like a tournament player superficially, like just moving around in a fashion was similar to what I saw on videos. At that point, I was pretty much just Mario and Luigi. First day of college, I just figure, hey, Doc is like Mario, but better. So I just switched to Doc, and I was Doc and Luigi for a while. And this was a time when I just liked practicing a lot in general. I wanted them to be able to move around with pretty much the whole cast. So I just screw around with a lot of characters. And by late 2006, I think Falco became my best character, and shortly after that, Fox was. So early 2007, I was a Falco and a Fox player. I liked pressing a lot of buttons, I liked being fast, and at least in my small little local community, I got good results. And after a while, I became a little obsessed with just trying to be fast and being technical. I like just sitting back and playing, I guess I could say, more calmly. And at that point, Sheik started appealing to me. That was kind of like right before the 2006-2007 school year ended. Over the summer of 2007, I really wanted to play Marth a lot, but I had a hard time with him. When I came back to college, I went to a little local college tournament, went on Marth and lost. Then just playing the same people like a day later with just Sheik, I was beating them, which kind of bugged me at the time. Because I was thinking, I put all this effort into Marth and I wasn't getting results, but I could still beat these people with this character I haven't practiced in forever. But yeah, so I said, okay, if that's what works for me, that's what works for me. So I was Sheik, and also Falco for a while with some Fox. And mostly Falco Sheik, though. So I did those in tournaments, did pretty well with Falco and Sheik. And at some point, the controller I liked using broke. The joystick had a tendency to consistently reset what it thought was a neutral position, and that just essentially made it unusable reliably. So I went to a secondary controller, but now I had this secondary controller and I couldn't always shoot lasers the way I wanted to. Like half my lasers, or maybe a third of them, went out in the wrong direction.
Right.
So I was thinking, okay, I practiced a little bit. This still would happen to me a lot. So I said, okay, I can't rely on this Falco character anymore. What else have I got? Well, I didn't play Fox too much anymore by this point, so I essentially just felt like I was left with the Sheik. But there were a lot of matchups I had issues with that Sheik. And at the time, I tended to just look for lots of short... Instead of just saying, okay, I'm just going to work on these matchups, since I had dabbled in so many characters, at least on some minor level, my first thought was, okay, what other characters can I use to solve some of the issues I had? For example, I was bad against Falco. I was especially bad against Falco on Final Destination. Like, even as my own Falco, that's not a matchup I tended to do very well on. So, one of the characters I did dabble in was Ice Climbers. I remember being impressed that she was able to do all these things with this character. And and I said, well, let's see. I used to know how to kind of do some things. I learned the basic chain grabs and all that jazz with them quite a while ago. Maybe I can do something with this character. So I tried just going into a tournament. It was mostly with Ice Climbers, although I still used Sheik for some matchups. And I got third, which number-wise was by far the best result I had gotten at that point, although the competition wasn't that great. So it's like, okay, this character is fun. I can apparently do well with this character, so I'm just going to keep playing them. So, yeah, that's essentially when I decided to actually main Ice Climbers. I did go through quite a lot of other characters beforehand, though.
Yeah.
Namely Fox, Falco, Mario, Luigi, Doc, Sheik, Marth. So, yeah, I guess 8th time's the charm.
Yeah, I guess it is. It seems to be working out so far. Are you gonna eventually switch back to Fox and fulfill the prodigy? The 20XX prodigy?
I don't really like playing Fox that much.
Yeah.
I mean, my Fox is okay, at least after a couple friendlies. I've been playing too long to not have a Fox to some degree. But, I don't know, I mean,
yeah.
If I'm going to cop out to a higher tier character, which I still wouldn't do as a main just because I want to main Ice Climbers there, but at this point I enjoy what they fit how I like to think about the game. But at least when it comes to like specific matchups when I might switch off, it's always going to be Sheik, Peach, or Marth, probably. Usually Sheik, even though I think my Peach is better than my Sheik. Peach just doesn't suit the matchup issues I have as well. And Marth is kind of just a situational thing that I occasionally find an excuse to use.
Yeah. So, after you got 3rd with Ice Climbers, have you been like steadily improving over time, or was there like this breakout and then suddenly you're like a force to be reckoned with at some of these tournaments and you've just gotten steadily better since then? Or how would you describe your improvement in this game?
Let's see. Early on, my improvement was very rapid because 2007 was a time when I was still fairly insecure as a person. I was, in terms of life, going through less than pleasant moments. And I really felt like I ought to be good at this game. And every time I wouldn't get really good results, that would kind of trouble me more than it should. Like, probably my first year and a half of tournaments or so, I typically only sleep like 4 hours afterwards because I was stressed about how badly I would do. So just waking up in the middle of the night, somewhat discontent with myself, was kind of common. So because I really didn't like not doing well, I put a lot of effort into making sure I could improve. So I spent a lot of time just thinking about what I could do better, a lot of time practicing, mostly on my own. And I think, yeah, throughout 2007 and 2009, I think my improvement was pretty rapid. Like, I think by March 2008, I was top 10 in SoCal. And granted, a lot of people did stop playing, so the PR wasn't quite what it used to be. But I was still on that level of players who could potentially do things locally in tournaments. And I continued to get better pretty steadily. I think within a year and a half of that, so like mid-2009, at that point I was good enough to occasionally take sets off people like Lucky, although they were still generally pretty clearly better overall. I was at least able to do some things. And let's see, I continued to put a lot of effort in the game for a little while after that. I think around late 2010 is when I slowed down a little bit. I mean, I would still think about the game and try to improve, but I wasn't as obsessive with it, which nowadays I'm perfectly content with. I'm totally fine not waking up in the middle of the night because I didn't win a tournament. I can't complain about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think that's just because at 2010, that was a point when I actually was starting to take sets off of some really good players. I think it was Winter Game Fest of 2010 that I beat Mewtwo in Losers Finals. He wasn't playing his best, but it was still a win over him, which I was happy about. Then, let's see, later on that year, don't go down there, Jeff, I play Hungry Box, I beat him. Again, I'm not playing my best, but still, it's a win I was happy about. So I think around 2010 was when I reached a point where, at least on some level, I was content with my play. And still not totally. Like I already mentioned at the start that I still generally do not like to watch myself play because I'm not happy with a lot of the decisions I make. But I at least felt like, okay, I'm at least reasonable at this game by now, which I'm okay with. And my kind of maniacal need for improvement shrunk quite a bit after that point. So, yeah, I don't even remember what the original question was anymore, but I'm assuming that was relevant to it.
Yeah, no, you've pretty much answered it. It was just, like, how did you improve? And then So like your attitude now is much healthier. Was there like anything specific that happened? Like, I'm happy to hear that you're not losing sleep over Smash, but like I'm a little curious whether that was a specific like decision, or you reached a certain point in the game where you were, like you said, more comfortable at least saying, okay, well, I'm good enough to not super obsess over this game, or just, you know, what happened? Do you think just kind of grew out of it, or?
Well, I think half of it about is what I mentioned earlier, that I had just reached a level of play that I was at least somewhat alright with. I didn't feel like I was awful. Like, I felt like being good at Smash was part of my identity, and then when I actually reached a point where I felt like if you could say I'm good at Smash, then that, I think, alone was part of it. There is more to it than that.
If it's personal, we don't have to get into it if you don't want.
Yeah, it kind of is, honestly. I'd probably rather not say too much
okay,
about
that's
that.
fine. That's fine. I do have another question though. Back to you getting much better at the game. It seems like for this 2009 period where you would take games off of Lucky, it seems like you've always been a very dangerous player, and that's still the case. Of course, you're able to take sets off of players who. I think many people, like for instance, you're ranked 21 on the MIOM top 100, yet you've taken more games off of the top 5 or more sets off of the top 5 than I think many people above you in those rankings. What is it about your play, you think, that makes you so universally dangerous to play against?
Let's see. I think part of it is just my character choice. Ice Climbers are a very volatile character, and you can make just a small number of errors, and they can punish you really, really hard for it. So if somebody's a little off point, if they're not playing as sharp as they would like to be, or if just for whatever reason, maybe they even are playing fine, but just happen to make a few missed calls here and there, or maybe I just kind of randomly make a few good guesses, I can punish really, really hard. Really, really harshly. Just maybe I can wobble you. Maybe I can just forward air, jab, reset, then transition that into a wobble. Maybe I just got a down smash. I read which way you teched afterwards, and I down smashed you again off stage, and then I edge guarded you. Ice Climbers just punish very harshly, and I think that is a decent chunk of it. Otherwise, I do feel like I have my days when I'm just fairly calm. Well, calm's not the word. Just focused solely on the game, not concerned with results. And I feel like on those days I tend to play a lot better. And it's not even really a matter of days. Sometimes my mood will change throughout the day, but I feel like this isn't something I'm consistent at. But yeah, when I'm not concerned with results and just very focused on the game itself, then I tend to play really, really well. But that's not something I find that I can do very consistently. So that would explain a little bit of the inconsistency, at least.
Yeah. So, if you had to, like yourself as a player, your strengths and your weaknesses, what would you, I guess, describe are your strengths and weaknesses as a player, as an Ice Climbers player, as a Smash player?
Let's see.
Because I think that's kind of a hard question for me whenever I try to think about, like, what am I good at, what am I not. I almost feel like my concept of how I think I play about Smash and how I actually play Smash, I almost feel like oftentimes they're totally different. It's yeah. So I just like to hear how people consider their play, because it might be different than I think people see.
Well, I feel like if there's any one thing that I tend to be good at, I feel like it's positioning myself. I feel like I think I put myself in reasonable places on stage, more of a micro level where I can position myself very precisely when it comes to close quarters interaction. And even if I'm not in overtly technical player nowadays. I do time themes really well. Like, for example, if I want to do an aerial after doing a short hop, I can pretty consistently get the aerial input in the frame or the frame after I go airborne. So I am, if not a person who pushes a lot of buttons, I push them very precisely.
Yeah.
At least most of the time. There are some times when they'll just have to do something I haven't done in a while and I'll mess it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would probably say positioning above all else. I feel like I have a good sense of what is a good position for me to be in, and I'm able to put myself there. And that would probably be the single most important thing. Other than that, I think I have good punishments. If I get a good hit in, I feel like I can either do a lot of damage off of it, or just shove the opponent into a bad position, and then put myself in a good position to respond to that and just keep working with the advantage I have. And if I'm not able to get an advantage, then I'm generally pretty good at resetting to neutral.
All right, that's reasonable. I feel like that's that's kind of my idea of how I see you play the game. Although it is interesting to hear you talk about your strengths being kind of technical is not really the word, because like you said, it's not like you're pushing a bunch of buttons, but you're describing your strengths. Whenever I think of your play, I always feel like you're a very mental player, that you get in people's heads, and then you're also very clutch. And actually, I do want to ask you about you have probably more clutch moments than almost anyone in Melee. Like you have your SoPo moments, so many of them actually. But the one that most people think of is the one at Kings of Cali 3, where you versus oh shoot, Silent Wolf. Sorry, I completely spaced. Yeah, what was how do you, like, does this come naturally? Are you a naturally clutch player? Like, how does your mindset look like when your back is to the wall and like you have to pull something out, or you've lost the set, or you've lost the game?
I think it tends not. I think my mindset actually tends not to be too different from how it is when I'm playing just in any other circumstances. I'm still focusing on the same things. I'm still trying to pay attention to what the opponent's doing and what's working for me and what's not working for me, probably more importantly. And this is something that I'll tend to get better at as the games go on. So I think a lot of it might just be that near the end of the round, I'm likely to have a better idea of what's going on than I did at, say, the start of the round. So I'll be able to make better decisions with respect to what the opponent is doing. Also, some people just don't seem to work with leads very well. Like against Silent Wolf, the comeback was mostly him just making lots of questionable decisions, lots of strange technical flubs. Like the jab down smash I did that won the game was easily crouch cancelable, but he just didn't do that. So I think it's a mix of other people not handling leads well, and me not getting flustered by being in a bad position. There was something else I wanted to say. Let me try to remember what that was. I'll get back to it if I remember.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that is interesting, because I guess you don't get really swept up in the moment, like the crowd is going crazy, but I think most people do, and especially, if I know there have been games where it's just me and a friend, and there's no pressure to win, and I've got a 3-stock lead, like you said, and then I'll make one bad decision, and instantly in my head I'm thinking, I think I just lost the game off of that, but I have a full 2 stocks to just do like a single up smash or something crazy like that, something simple. But then I tunnel vision on losing, I guess, and maybe that affects people, and if it doesn't affect you, then that that's good.
What I recall thinking in the case of Silent Wolf was when I was on my last stock and lost Nana, my initial thought was just, Well, I played Silent Wolf a couple of times before in the past year, and I won both of those. He's playing well today, so good for him. That's essentially what I thought. Let's just see what I can do with this Popo. And then I ended up winning anyways. It's like I felt kind of bad for him, but yeah. Yeah, I wasn't worried about losing. I just felt, well, he's a great player. He deserves it this time. Good for him. And then he just ended up not pulling it out, which I can't complain about.
Yeah. Did you trend on Twitter with that hashtag SoPo? I think.
Yes. I
yeah,
did.
you didn't you? So good job on that. Let's see. Also wanted to ask you about ice climbers, and then what you feel like you in particular versus other ice climbers. I know you said you punish much harder, and you position yourself in ways and choose follow-ups that allow you to follow up much more often, I guess. Like your follow-up options lead to more follow-up options, I guess, in case it gets dropped or something happens. But is there something? There aren't that many ice climbers mains in the world, probably not enough, but for the few who do main ice climbers or are looking to main ice climbers, what do you see in other players that you feel like, if only they had done this, or if like there's a mental thing going on that you might see?
So am I supposed to call out individual people here, or just say general things?
Either or. The question came from a Redditor, and not one that I've seen at any tournaments or seen like on any streams at least. So I guess for the, I don't want to call this person out. This is like a lower level ice climber, but probably well, not like, you know, Wobbles or yourself or
I can say the most common things that I feel new ice climbers players tend to be badly, and that I guess I could say sub-elite ones tend to mess up on a lot. So if there's any number one criticism I have to give to just ice climbers players as a whole, maybe outside of some of the several top ones, although not even always them in some cases, is that they depend too much on the opponent making errors. They rely on the opponent messing up an attack on their shield that gets them a chain grab or a wobble or something. They rely on the opponent, I don't know, misspacing an aerial or doing something that lets them get a silly down smash. They just in general tend to rely a lot on the opponent screwing up. And that's a game plan that falls apart when the opponent just plays safely and doesn't mess these things up. For example, my Marth tends to beat a lot of other ice climbers, even some really solid ones whom I won't name. My Marth tends to do really well against them. My Marth isn't amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but I just space down tilts, I forward air, I throw out forward tilts if I think the ice climber's going to go in. I just say, okay, you're not going to grab me, I'm just going to make this little wall here, let's see if you can get in on it. And a lot of them just sort of try to hope I mess it up and just brute force their way in, and they just don't get in. And I just punish them for doing it. And they need to find a way of getting in that essentially tricks me. It's not just hope I do something badly, it's find an opening in one way or another and make it happen. Create the opening, essentially. Don't just rely on me being bad, because that's not going to get you too far. It'll work really well at a low level of play. I mean, like, I essentially did that with ice climbers when I started. Like, the whole rationale behind ice climbers against Falco in 2007 was, okay, I'm just going to shield grab these guys, and I'll kill them off of that with down throw down air, because who's going to smash the IBAT? I mean, over time, that's obviously changed. I've needed to kind of cut out a lot of these bad habits over time in order to compete. Like, for a long time, I just did have a really terrible shield grabbing habit. I would just try to shield grab everything. And it wasn't until I just started really actively losing a bunch of sets because of this that I said, okay, I really need to tone this down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel like Ice Climbers players as a whole could afford to just find ways of getting in on their opponents Or, on the other hand, maybe just not let the opponent get in, something like that, but doing so in a way that does not rely on the opponent making just essentially an execution error of some sort, be it in a form of a positioning error or just something like a misstell cancel. Just something of that sort. I suppose players, they shouldn't rely on that sort of thing as much as they tend to.
Right. So take control of the match. Force a mistake instead of hoping for one. I like that. I think that even transcends ice climbers as well. Of course, it's very applicable to ice climbers because your options for doing that, you have to get very creative in your spacing and your positioning and stuff. But I feel like that's something that I know myself. I could definitely improve on that.
Well, I tend to single out Ice Climbers players in particular just because it's a strange character that a lot of people tend not to play against very well. So, like, for example, going again back to my Marth thing, my Marth beat an Ice Climbers player at Apex fairly solidly, and then that same Ice Climbers player went on to beat a Marth who, by all accounts, is a much better Marth than I am, and he beat him in pools. So it's like, okay. So I could probably already picture what this Marth was trying to do. He's probably trying to dash on slot. He was probably trying to go for forward smash reads. He was probably just doing lots of generic Marth stuff that ends up being punishable against Ice Climbers. And whenever, as an Ice Climbers player, I fight against a Marth like this, I essentially just feel like it's a free win. I just say, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and take advantage of your errors and just get a bunch of mileage off that, because why wouldn't I? But in the grand scheme of things, it's not something you can rely on. Like, that didn't work against my Marth.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, like, in the case, granted, you should always be able to just know how to take advantage of a situation and find ways of hitting the opponent, even if they're not necessarily making any mistakes per se. But if you're a Fox, well, everybody already knows how to play against a Fox. You don't need to worry about people doing stupid things that don't work against Fox that much, because they're generally not going to do that. At least adequate players are. Yeah. Whereas in the case of Ice Climbers, you can even beat some pretty reasonable, reputable players just because they don't know how to fight against the character. But there's always a point where you're going to run into somebody who will just automatically beat you if you try these things against them. For example, like, not to call out this guy because he's a friend of mine, but Andrew AJT62, he's an Ice Climbers player from New York. He made it to the winners finals of his pool, and then Lucky 4-stocked and 2-stocked him, because Lucky just does not make these little mistakes that he was capitalizing on. Like, he would try to get in, but he wouldn't do so in a way that worked against what Lucky was doing, and he just wasn't able to get any mileage off. He wasn't able to create any openings against Lucky, because Lucky just didn't throw anything into his hands.
So, oh, sorry. I was just gonna say. Oh, sorry. You go. You're the you're the guest. You should talk.
Like Lucky, you just can't depend on them screwing up. They're just not going to do it enough to let you win the set. You need to actively find ways of dealing with what they're throwing at you. You can't just be lazy and say, okay, let's run in and down smash and hope it works. Let's run in and grab and hope it works. Let's shield grab and hope it works. It's just not a strategy that's good in the long term. It relies on the opponent being bad, and if they're not being bad against Ice Climbers, then you're going to lose. That's just the reality of the situation. So yeah, that's what I have to say on that topic.
Yeah. That's I really liked that analysis as well, because especially in the case of your friend versus Lucky, like unless you're a very top level player, I would just be tempted to think, okay, well, I mean, you lost to Lucky because just Lucky's the better player, right? Like, Lucky has been playing, and he's been playing against Mango and all that kind of stuff, but I mean, we've all been playing the same game for so long. Like, why is he specifically better? I liked that you were able to break that down more specifically than just, okay, well, Lucky has the experience. He's not gonna, he's not gonna make the same mistakes. Let's see. One thing I'd like to ask while we're doing some analysis on stuff, what what do you think is Ice Climber's hardest matchup? I'm guessing Peach, right?
Before I get to this, could I actually say something about a remark you just made?
Yeah.
You mentioned something about saying that people will say, oh, he lost to Lucky because he's a better player. Just in general, that is never a very useful answer to give as for why a player lost. It's always, sure, it's very true that somebody could say, okay, the guy I'm playing against is more experienced than me, and that's why he's won. But in terms of gameplay decisions, that is not going to be the case. You can still learn a lot from why you lost. Like, I never would lose to somebody and say, okay, I lost because he's better than me. I would say, okay, I lost because he was doing this and I didn't know how to handle it. Or maybe I was doing this and it wasn't working. What could I be doing differently? How could I handle this? What options do I have at my disposal? And I think about that. And if I didn't really like the answers I was coming up with, or when I had another opportunity to test and they didn't work, I would say, okay, let's look up a video of Chu and see what Chu did, or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, just in general, I would not say, oh, I lost to this guy because he's better than me. I would say he lost to me because he did so-and-so things and I did not handle them well. Just a much more productive way of approaching the situation. Okay, so as for the question, Ice Climber's hardest matchup, I know Wobbles has lots of interesting opinions on this. My opinions are generally more traditional than his. I still would probably single out Peach just because she kills Nana better than anybody, and she's great at occupying a position that Ice Climbers can't really handle that well. And she's just a very difficult character to grab because, like, everything she does only has 4 frames of landing lag pretty much all of the time.
Yeah.
Other than that, I would say I think Falcon's really rough just because of how well he kills Nana and because of how good he is at making himself difficult to hit. I still think there's something my opinions have kind of changed on. My opinions have gone back and forth on this, but nowadays I'm kind of inclined to say Ganondorf, just because, again, he kills Nana amazingly well, and he's really good at making himself hard to hit. And sometimes I'll go Sheik on Ganons. It depends on the particular Ganondorf player, but some Ganons it's just really, really hard to hit them. And if they make themselves hard to hit and they find a way of just getting a single isolated hit, Nana's dead. And then I'm just trying to chase down a Ganondorf with Popo.
Yeah.
So I'm not convinced, but based on my own experiences and observation, I would probably be inclined to list Ganondorf, at least for the time being in this state of the metagame. And anything else? I would add Marth too. I think even though this is a matchup that I'm still generally happy to play in tournament for the most part, I feel that if Marth plays against Ice Climbers very well, it's very, very difficult. And this is one of the things that I would agree with Wobbles on. I think Wobbles might have said Marth is their hardest matchup. I wouldn't put him over Peach, but I do think that a Marth that knows what he's doing is very rough for Ice Climbers, just because he's very good at shutting down their approach options and just generally making himself very difficult to hit. And to cite empirical evidence that would support that, I could point to Wobbles 6-0ing Taj. No, sorry, I said it the wrong way. Taj 6-0ing Wobbles in Grand Finals 2 weeks before Evo, where Wobbles gets second.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not that isolated sets prove anything, but I do feel like a Marth that knows what he's doing is definitely one of the roughest things for an Ice Climbers player. It's just that most Marths tend not to know what they're doing. It's not like Peach, where you can be a little sloppy in some regards and still win. Marth really needs to be on point to beat Ice Climbers, but I think he does.
On the topic of Wobbles, he does, or did, I guess, very well against Peaches in general. At least of the matchups I've seen. I could be wrong about this, but I remember being at a tournament that he ended up winning, and over half of the players who had played against him, ones who I had never seen play Peach ever, picked Peach versus him. And I mean, there were a few, like DOH was there. He's obviously a very good Peach player. There were Peaches that of a legitimate caliber that he did have to fight, but like he just seemed to know that matchup in a way that it looked easy for him, even against high level Peaches. Um, how do you feel like you approach the matchup, or how did he approach the matchup? That like what is the difference there? Like you said, you take a more traditional view of that matchup than I guess he did.
Well, I at least, well, more precisely, I would just say, well, I wouldn't say necessarily take a more traditional view of the matchup. It's just that I view it as worse than he does, which I guess you could parse as the same thing. But anyways, yeah, Wobbles does have a lot of experience against it, against Peaches. He will punish them for making little mistakes. But, actually, could you restate the question? I'm not entirely sure what I'm...
Okay, I was just gonna ask you like what he did, if there was anything that Wobbles did against Peaches that seemed to give him an edge on it, or was it just with experience? Like I said, he played so many Peaches.
He's good at challenging Peach in the air. I think that's the biggest thing. He knows how to hit her when she's airborne. And you know, like he finds ways of just getting these weird back airs and forward airs against Peach when she's floating. And he'll do that a lot. And just generally speaking, he has really good ground movement. Like, one of the things Ice Climbers do have on Peach is that they're just really fast on the ground. This can be kind of hard for Peach to accurately read their movement. So Wobbles will just trick people a lot and then catch them when they're airborne. It's something that I can do that to an extent, but most of the time in practice, for whatever reason, when I try it, it tends not to work. Like, if I try to back air a Peach, a lot of the time they'll just float back and forward air me. So at least I have my own little approach to the matchup that generally works pretty well for me nowadays, where I mostly just sit back. I try to force Peach to approach me at a certain angle and intercept. If I do want to hit her out of the air, it'll usually be with something kind of weird like Sync Squall Hammer instead of back air, just because I find that it's easier to catch her out of the air with it. The reward isn't as good, but it's still by no means bad. It does about 20%, and Peach is generally liable to die off the top at about 80. So 20% is an amount of damage that I'm perfectly content dealing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I face forwards a lot. I like having Nana do a blizzard out on the ground. Even if Peach can get over that, I can still cover Peach's approaches from above by doing something like run forward and up smash or short hop auto cancel up air.
All right.
So yeah, I still feel like at the end of the day, though, Peach is just too good at randomly separating and killing the Ice Climbers for it to be something I want to actively do too much. I still will go Ice Climbers against some Peach players. It depends on the player a lot. It depends on if they have any secondaries, for one thing. If they don't, then I'll probably just go She, because it's just pretty much strictly a better matchup for me. But if they do have secondaries, then I do need to know how to play Ice Climbers, because I don't want to be like doing Sheik against a Fox, because I don't want to play that matchup.
Yeah.
So, and it's still an important matchup to know in any case, just due to counterpicking.
Right. You don't see that too much these days at top level play, people chasing each other with, you know, their secondaries and stuff. Like, that used to happen all the time. It was a huge deal until Mango and Armada started getting like top placements, and at the time Mango he pretty much just played Puff, and HBox as well, and a few other players, like top players, only played one character. So the prevailing thought was only play one character, get godlike at one character, and then you'll never need to swap off. But up to that point, you know, there hadn't been that thinking hardly at all, I think. Anyway, unless you have a comment on that.
Well, it's not an era I was really a part of. I mean, you did have people like Chu who did essentially everything. Well, I mean, Chu did have a lot of characters, but all of his accomplishments were with Ice Climbers. Ken did have quite a few other good characters. I guess he did have a Fox, but that was mostly because of weird stages. Yeah. I think the stage list shrinking over time might be a part of this. Like, you don't need to worry about people taking you to Congo Jungle or Peach's Castle anymore. So there is perhaps less of a need to have a pocket space animal for things like that. But yeah, it's not something I can comment on too much since I wasn't really a part of that era. I essentially grew up in the Mango era.
Yeah, that's fair. So okay, I remember watching a set. It might have been at Kings of Cali, but Homemade Waffles was commentating, and he mentioned something that between games, he said, "Watch Fly." He's going like he thinks between games. A lot of people will just jump, straight back into the fray. Like, okay, I lost. I need to play. I need to prove that I shouldn't have lost. But between games, and it seems to be true every time. Like I see it now. Like you'll take a second or a few, and then like really process what was going on. Like what kind of stuff do you think about? Like okay, I got hit by this, or something about my positioning was wrong, or what was I like? What kind of stuff do you think about between these matches that it seems to work too?
A lot of it is just what was working for me and what wasn't working for me. Why wasn't what I was doing working, and why was what the other guy was doing working? And what could I be doing differently? How would the stages factor into this? Would it be better to go with so-and-so type of stage or so-and-so other type of stage? Like, I could give lots of examples of this over time. I think I would go back to the Silent Wolf set at Kings of Cali 3 again. So yeah, first game, well, I don't even remember what it was on. It was probably on Dreamland, because that's where I typically go against Foxes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Dreamland. And I think he wins solidly. So I'm thinking, okay, it's kind of hard to catch him. So I'll just go FD, try to corner him, do stuff like that. I didn't really have too much of an idea going into that. So then he plays this really dash dance heavy game. It was kind of hard for me to catch him, at least with the way I usually play. And I think he 3-stocked me. So then I was thinking, okay, he's going to be doing this sort of keep away game. So I should maybe instead go to a level where he's not going to be able to do that. It's just, even in the first game, he's just playing a really hard to get game. So I said, okay, I'm just going to go Fountain of Dreams, and I'm going to be really aggressive. I'm going to go in a lot, try to just catch him, corner him, and I beat him pretty solidly on Fountain. Then he goes Stadium, and I was happy that he went Stadium, because I was pretty sure that the whole idea was just do what he did on FD. And by this point, it's like, okay, if you're just going to play really dash dance camping heavy, then I'm just going to just really overshoot my approaches. Like, I'm pretty sure I opened up that game by doing like 2 wave dashes past him and forward smash, and he ran into it. And I knocked him off stage. So I did that a little bit, and I did it enough so that he would be scared to just keep dash dance camping. And then I went back to more of a usual game, and then I think I 3-stocked him. Then he went Yoshi's, and Yoshi's wasn't really like any of the previous stages, so it felt like we were just both kind of going in blank. And initially went well for him, and then it didn't. So yeah, I do pay attention to what's been going on in the games, what I could be doing in response to these things, and just, yeah, pretty much all that stuff that I just already mentioned.
Yeah. How do you think about the stages as an Ice Climbers main? I mean, there's I give the general answers whenever people ask about, the 5 neutrals in Pokemon Stadium, but as an Ice Climbers main, how... You said it's a little interesting. You said that Yoshi's wasn't going to play like any of the other stages, even though I would feel like it's a little more cramped. So maybe it would play more like Fountain of Dreams. But like, how do you think about the stages as the perspective of an Ice Climbers main?
Well, okay, I'll just go through this stage by stage, I guess.
Sure.
So FD, Ice Climbers generally like FD because it gives them a lot of horizontal room to work with, and it doesn't give the opponent platforms to work with. Ice Climbers generally don't benefit too much from having platforms. They don't like to sit on platforms. They have a hard time attacking a lot of characters who are just sitting on platforms or jumping between them. So FD denies other characters that option. It tends to be really good for Ice Climbers. Let's see, Battlefield. I personally don't like Battlefield as Ice Climbers. I know some players who do. I don't like the platform heights for them. It's kind of like I can't up smash through the low platforms. I need to do a short hop auto cancel it up there, and they'll barely poke through the platforms. And just generally speaking, it's kind of awkward to punish people up there. Like if I want to board a platform to attack somebody, whether it's just jump wave land on, jump land cancel ice block or something, it takes a while to rise. Just because Ice Climbers don't rise that quickly, and the platforms are kind of high. So I find it kind of obnoxious to try to pin field. so I'm not a fan of it. Fountain of Dreams I like a lot because the low platforms are too low for the opponent to do any sort of reasonable camping with, at least most of the time. Characters with high short hops can still do it. Like Sheik and Falcon, I think, are still pretty good at handling what Ice Climbers do there because they can still work with the low platforms, partially just because of their short hop height. But against a lot of characters, they just can't really sit on a platform and be safe against Ice Climbers. I can up smash through it, I can easily poke through it with short hop forward air, and just essentially anything I can do will hit people there. So in some ways, it's not too different from FD, except that it has less horizontal space to work with, which against some characters is a good thing. Against Fox, it's a good thing. For example, they do have their one top platform, but it's the only place they can really safely run to a lot of the time. So all things considered, I like that a lot. Yoshi's generally isn't too different from Fountain. The blast zones are different, which is something that sometimes matter. It usually doesn't make too much of a big deal. It's worse against Fox because of the lower blast zone, I think. The platforms are kind of odd to work with in that a lot of the reason the platforms are odd to work with is because of the slopes near the side of the main stage. It'll make it so that I can pretty easily attack people when they're on the inner edges of the outer platforms, but not so much when they're on the outer edges of the outer platforms. So even though it's kind of a cramped stage, characters like Fox and Falcon can still kind of do things like the way they do on Battlefield, where they can just run around on platforms a long time. Because it's not like Fountain, where the platforms are so low that I can just attack you there easily. They can still just sit on the platforms relatively safely a lot of the time. So it's still, a lot of the time it'll be good for Ice Climbers still, just because, all things considered, in spite of that, compared to like Dreamland or Battlefield, it still tends to be easier to catch people there. And also just, he has a good knockback growth stats and stuff. Ice Climbers can tend to kill there really, really early. What else? There's a Dreamland. Dreamland is very matchup specific for me. It can be hard to catch people there, but it also tends to be hard for characters to gimp Nana and stuff, just because they tend not to be near any edges. Just as a player in general, who likes, just since I generally like to be safe when I can be, I'll deviate from that if I feel that I need to, but since my default preference will generally be play kind of safe, I like having a lot of space to work with. Just all things considered, I usually tend to be pretty comfortable on Dreamland. As for a stage, as for how Ice Climbers do there, I feel like I already mentioned it, but I think it varies a lot by matchup. I think it's obviously great against Marth, but that's more because Marth is bad there. It's kind of fine against Sheik, Fox, and Falco, even though it can be annoying to try to catch them sometimes. When, on the other hand, when they're running away, they're generally not accomplishing too much, so it doesn't matter all that much. So, I guess Dreamland I'm a little hazier on than the other stages, but I generally like it, just more because of a player preference thing than character preference. So, then, let's see. I'll say a little bit about Stadium, too. I think Ice Climbers are really good on Stadium. It gives them a lot of horizontal space to work with. The platforms tend not to be too intrusive on the neutral layout. I don't really care if people are sitting on those. They don't have a lot of places to go, and the platforms are kind of low anyways. And it also has a low vertical, it has a low ceiling. Ice Climbers are really good at killing vertically, whether it's just with a stray up smash or down throw to charged up smash. That'll kill a lot of characters really quickly. So, overall, I do like Stadium a lot. It's questionable against Fox, but I feel like it's good against just about everybody else. Maybe not Falcon. Falcon tends to be good there for reasons that are similar to why Ice Climbers are good there, and he's probably a little better at it. So I guess against Fox and Falcon, I don't really like Stadium that much, but it's still not necessarily bad against them. And against pretty much every other character, Stadium is a stage I'll like a lot. I think it works very well for Ice Climbers. Yeah, that's the general rundown of that, at least based on how I see things.
Okay. Well, I like that. Let's see. Are there any players in particular, like on the West Coast, or just if you sometimes, I guess, randomly match up against these players, you make it to top 8 or something? Are there any players that you feel you have a roadblock with, or that you just like you have a hard time just imagining yourself beating? I don't know if there is any player like that, or you have a rivalry with any players.
I don't have any real rivalries. I'm not really bitter towards anyone, so I don't feel like I have any real rivalries. As for players I don't like to run into, S2J is usually the one I'm most afraid of. Also Mango, just because he knows how I play kind of inside out, and because he plays Falcon. Generally speaking, really, really good Falcons are something that I don't like to run into. Mm-hmm. Some Peaches, but generally speaking, I'm not too worried about Peach anymore, just because I can do Sheik for that. It's a little more complicated against people who have multiple characters, because then I pretty much will need to rely on my Ice Climbers still, at least in some of the games. So I guess Peach is kind of a concern, but it's not something I'm overtly worried about. Like, I do have, at least in recent times, I have a positive record against SoCal's Peach players. Like, I did beat MacD the last time I played him, and that was with going Sheik. Connor did beat me the last time we played, but I beat him the 2 times before that with a mix of Ice Climbers and Sheik. There's not too much that I feel like I can't fundamentally deal with. Like, even in terms of the players that are harshest for me, I feel like it's something that I still ought to be able to do if I just play well enough.
Yeah.
So, not too many roadblocks. I guess a kind of odd one might be Larry, or DHF. He beats me more often than not, even though he struggles with a bunch of people that I don't. And I think just because he has a very peculiar playstyle that tends to work against the things I like to do. After he beat me the last time we played in Melee, I did just take some time to sit down and reevaluate things, so I do plan on playing rather differently the next time I play against him. But yeah, he's one of the more peculiar ones.
Alright. Let's see. There were a few questions on Reddit asking about your matchups recently versus Ken, and then also versus AMSA. I'd like to talk about the Ken matchup first. And I remember watching this. This is an exciting set. It's one of my favorite sets of all time, actually, because I feel like both of you are very, very clutch players. You get better as the sets go on. So it was seeing both of you figure each other out as, you know, one game got through with a clutch victory, and then the next game got through with a different clutch victory, and then it was intense watching. And what were your thoughts on that set? And like, have you gone back and watched it, or thought, you know, processed it? What are your thoughts on it?
I never bothered to watch it because I just felt like I was flustered and playing badly. I was nervous. I was just in general in pools. I was not really in emotionally the best place because, well, I guess I came into Kings of Cali 3 kind of with high expectations for myself. High expectations just never do anything good for me. They just make me get flustered when things don't go well. It's like I lost to Eddie, for example, 2-0, even though I usually beat him. I made a bunch of questionable decisions. I didn't really catch on. I wasn't just focused on the things I should have been focusing on. So I didn't really bother to watch the Ken set because I didn't feel like I would have learned anything from it. I just wasn't in a good place mentally at the time. So in kind of a weird way, I feel like getting humbled probably was a good thing because it helped me play. It helped calm me down for bracket. I felt like, well, I already lost to this guy who hasn't played the game in years. What else have I got to lose? So in bracket, I played a lot calmer and I think a lot better. For example, Daryl, I had a really close set with him in pools, but then I played him again in bracket and I beat him easily 3-0 then. Nothing was really close about it then. So I don't have too many feelings on the Ken set. I feel like I just didn't handle it well. I got nervous. As for the AMSA set, I felt kind of bad about that because I am much less oblivious to weird Yoshi things than most people are. I have a decent understanding of how the character works, but I still got caught off guard by a lot of little things. Like, I knew he was going to do egg lay. I saw him do that against Chu. So I was thinking, okay, maybe I'll spot dodge and roll behind him and punish it or something. Something like that. But first thing was, he would hit me with the move before I thought he would. So I would be sitting in my shield, I'd be planning on doing a spot dodge or a roll. And then he would just hit me before I would do that. So that caught me off guard a little bit. First game, that happened a few times. I ended up losing Nana a couple times pretty quickly just because of that. What else? And then when I did start timing it better, I realized Eglay doesn't have a lot of end lag, so I tried to punish it, but I couldn't. And just generally speaking, throughout the set, I was really confused about when I had frame advantage. Afterwards, more recently, I just went in Dolphin. I tested a bunch of things in frame advantage, so now I have a decent sense of when I actually do have frame advantage against Yoshi and when I don't. I since then have come up with some other ideas, but overall, I guess it was just kind of an obnoxious set for me. Well, I don't want to put it that way. It was just a set where I didn't really understand what was going on, and it's difficult to feel.
It felt cheesy, in a way.
In a way, I don't want to necessarily put it that way because, well, Amsa reminds me of Axe because beneath all the weird tricks, he is a good player.
Of course.
I mean, like, the best evidence of that is probably the set with Esfet on the Salty Suite, where Esfet actually comes in with an idea of what to do when Amsa does the adapting. So, I mean, I have absolutely no intention of discrediting Amsa, but I did feel like I was just losing to themes because I didn't understand what was going on. And it's difficult to feel remotely okay about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like I already said, since then, I've done some testing. So it's not something I intend on being caught off guard with again.
That's
not that I would
hear.
necessarily expect to win, because he is a good player, but I feel like I would be a lot better prepared now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people got caught off guard by a lot of things that AMSA did. Like the platform dropping caught a lot of people. Not a lot of people are used to having to deal with consistent platform drop stuff, and they got caught really hard.
That's more that Yoshi just doesn't have shield stun, so he has a better shield drop than everybody else does.
I actually did not know that, but that makes sense.
Every other character in the game, frames of shield stuns given by move damage plus 4.45, all divided by 2.235, and you take the floor of that. That's frames of shield stun that take effect after hit lag ends. Yoshi doesn't have shield stun. He only goes through hit lag. So because of that, he's able to shield drop faster than every other character can.
Wow. I'm gonna get you to write that down, like the formula down for me later, or I guess I can look it up.
I'll write it down in the chat.
Yeah, because I've been wondering how shield stun is calculated for a long time, and whole interview's worth it. So just for that, I love that kind of stuff. Frames of shield stun, floor times move damage. Anyway,
not floor times, it's floor of, as in biggest integer less than or equal to that number.
Oh, okay. All right. That's awesome. But yeah, I'm not sure when your next chance would be to play AMSA. I feel like a lot of people, obviously he is an amazing player, but I do feel like a lot of people would not get caught by some of the stuff they had gotten caught by, like all the platform drop stuff and whatnot.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Eventually, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when the next... I bet if somebody sponsored him, he would come to another tournament.
I know Meta, a British Columbian player, wants to help pay for his plane tickets to come to some things.
Well, that would be exciting. But anyway, not to dwell on that too much. One other question on Reddit was about your opinion on the Ice Climbers versus Falco matchup. He said, or this person on Reddit had said that he had heard your opinion was that Ice Climbers has a slight advantage, or at least some kind of advantage versus Falco. He wanted to know why you think that, what are the main tools that Falco has, and why are Ice Climbers good at dismantling those tools?
I feel like it's approximately even. Generally speaking, I don't care too much about matchup ratios. I care more about how the matchup works. That's the actual useful information to know. Like whether it's 60-40, whatever that even means. Nobody even agrees on a definition, but stuff like that is not useful information. It's only really important if a matchup is so bad that you would feel you would need to switch it. So, I don't know. It feels approximately even to me. Slight edge one way or another, I don't really care. As for why I feel like the Ice Climbers at least are able to do well against Falco, They have a lot of really good tools against things that Falco is generally good at. They handle lasers really, really well. Like, if Falco does a short hop laser, I can just dash forward and short hop Blizzard. The laser will hit Popo and Nana will Blizzard through that. There's also a million little variations of it. Like, if I want to go forward and do this out of shield, I'll do a side B desync out of shield. The laser will hit Popo, I'll have Nana Blizzard. I could even, if I think Falco's going to go in, I don't really do this anymore, even though I kind of want to start experimenting with it again because I thought it was cool. I do the B out of shield desync. I have Nana drift a little behind me in Blizzard. So if Falco tries to go in with a short hop laser, the laser hits Popo and I'll just run into Nana's Blizzard. So, other than that, if I just shoot a bunch of synced ice blocks in response to lasers, that can kind of harass him. It's not the end all be all of stopping Falco's camping, because like Dr. PP, for example, will just shield the ice blocks and keep timing lasers, but it is something that'll at least, if not hit Falco, will force a response out of him. So ice climbers handle lasers really, really well. I feel like that's a big part of it. And it's just not too hard. I feel like it's not too hard to just hit him or punish him harshly. Like if Falco wants to go in, I can just throw out a forward smash. I'm more disjointed than Falco generally, so ice climbers can just generally afford to throw out hitboxes, and if he runs into them, then, well, sucks to be him, I guess.
Yeah.
If I read that he's not going to go in and he's on the ground, I could just probably wave dash and forward smash or back air or something, and he can just easily dodge that. The style of Falco play that's traditionally given me the hardest time is just sort of a heavy platform camping style, but even then, ice climbers are more disjointed above them than Falco is below him. So if I can just read Falco descending, I can catch him with... Generally, an auto-cancel up air would be best. Full jump up air would be fine too, although I feel like that's actually probably caused me more problems than it's solved. Up tilt is okay, especially if you're on version 1.0, because it's harder to smash the guy out of then. Up smash is kind of ballsy, I wouldn't do that too much, but mainly up air and up tilt, I mean. You can just catch Falco if he's trying to play a heavy platform game. So yeah. I just feel like ice climbers are just really good at dealing with a lot of things that Falco is traditionally pretty good at.
Alright.
And they punish him really harshly. Which I guess isn't that unusual, but even compared to other characters, ice climbers I feel punish Falco unusually harshly.
So, unless there's anything else you want to talk about with Melee, I'd actually like to talk about Project M a little bit before. Okay. Yeah, so you have been involved in the Project M community, and you've been on the back room for quite some time. I remember you and I actually.
2011.
Yeah, 2011. So yeah, I remember because that was the same time I was really interested in joining the PMBR, and we would talk about, I don't even remember, all kinds of Project M stuff in the IRC chat. Do people still go to that? I hope so. That was a great place.
There's still a Project M channel on the Game Surge network, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah, people still go there.
All right,
There's some other places people go to now. Like there's some Exat channel, or however it's pronounced, that people play Wi-Fi on a lot, although that's something I have no interest in, so I never go there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole Octothorpe Project M channel is still there.
Cool. So what has your involvement been with being on the Project M backroom over the years?
Well, it's changed over time. Nowadays, I mostly will just contribute feedback to just general game mechanics discussions and the characters I play. Or at least the characters I'm interested in. Like, I don't really use Ice Climbers in Project M, but I still contribute to their development. And other than that, I pay a lot of attention to DDD. Try to make sure he's in an okay place. But yeah, outside of, and I guess kind of Pit, but I don't pay too much attention to a lot of character-specific themes. I will partake in discussions pertaining to just general game discussion, or general discussions about certain game mechanics, like whether we should implement certain sort of physics change, or maybe I don't know, maybe something could be done with footstools. I'll partake in discussions like those. Mostly general things.
Yeah. How do you feel DDD is, like, in terms of just, it's, I don't know how many DDD players there are. You seem to be the best one by kind of a lot. But how do you feel DDD fares against, I guess, the rest of the Project M cast? Because when I play the game, and I haven't admittedly played very much of it in the last year or so, but I enjoy DDD a lot. It just seems like a lot of the rushdown characters sometimes, like, he takes a lot of punishment, but if you can get that one opening, you tend to do very well. But it always felt like to me, against a perfect opponent, or a highly consistent opponent, then you would never get the chance. But what are your opinions on the character?
My opinions kind of lie between a couple of common extremes. Most people put DDD in like bottom 5 in the game, and then you'll have people like Victor from British Columbia who says, "Oh, this is one of the best characters in the game." I think he's okay. He's not really that great in neutral. Like, he just isn't that fast horizontally. He does have some little tricks that'll speed him up. Like, he has a great platform waveland, basically like a Ganon style one, but easier. And he does have that trick where you air dodge into Waddle Dees or Waddle Doos and you go really fast. But that has a lot of issues in that some characters can just really easily hit you out of that. They can get them out of the way. Like, I don't really like it to approach Fox that much, for example, if you still just hit DDD straight out of it. Although it's something that's there. But yeah, I guess that also requires a lot of setup, though. You need to get a Waddle Dee or Waddle Doo out, and those are not something you can just pull out quickly. It's not like a turnip that you can just throw when the opponent's pull out when the opponent's far away. It takes a while to get one of those guys out. So he tends to lose in neutral. A lot of characters that are good at dash dancing or just running away tend to be kind of hard to get in on. But the thing is, I feel like even against those characters, I can still manage to corner them. Like, because DDD tends to live a long time, he can afford to take a lot of damage, so if they're throwing projectiles and stuff like that, it's not too big a deal for me usually. I usually just sort of try to slowly get my way in. I'll pay attention to when they do commit to going in and trying to intercept that. If I can get an interception, I can generally get a lot of mileage off that. And even if they are just being really stubborn and not going in a lot, I feel like I'm able to corner them by the edge and then either force a response or just hit them out of it. So even if he's not great in neutral, I feel like he still has the tools he needs to ultimately win enough exchanges to win a lot of games. It's kind of hard for me to be certain about a lot of things, though. There are some things I think he struggles with pretty badly. For example, I think a game and watch that just positions himself and throws bacon really well is something that's really, really hard for him to deal with. Some projectile spammers, maybe. Although, honestly, I feel like most of the time, as long as I understand how the projectiles work, I'm able to eventually weave my way in. So, I don't know. I do think there are some things he struggles with, but I want to be really, really cautious about how I go about improving him, if at all. Because, for one thing, I don't want to be the guy who just nerfs his character if he's not having, or not nerfs, buffs his character if he's not having success with him and buffs in kind of ridiculous ways. The thing, then that's for a couple of reasons. One, if I do implement buffs of some sort, first of all, I want to make sure that they are warranted. I want to make sure that it's an issue with the character, it's not an issue with me as a player. And that takes quite a bit of actual playtesting to do against proficient players. So I'm very, very cautious about implementing buffs. And secondly, if I do buff him in some way or another, I would want it to be in a way that does not really interfere with his current feel. Like, I really like the way DDD moves. I like the way he punishes. He's just a really fun character for me to play. And I don't want to, like, implement something that'll drastically change his feel. I just don't have any interest in doing that at all. So if I were to make changes, it would have to be kind of subtle ones that don't really change his feel, but still help him in ways in which he presumably suffers. And I would want to, as already mentioned, make sure that this is something that he actually struggles with before I throw in a fix.
Yeah, that's something that bugs me a lot about Project M, is whenever I go back and play it, I always feel like people, like you said, a lot of characters have been overbuffed, that a lot of characters don't have like any real problems to them, and not that you want a character to struggle, but a character can be good and still have problems. But I feel like Mario, for instance, he's hardly weak in any particular way. That like he used to have problems with recovery, but now he has one of the best in the game. He has a great zoning game with his fireballs. His hitboxes are like just very safe in general and very fast. It does bug me a lot of these characters, but I'm very happy to hear that's your approach to balancing them, even if it takes a little bit longer. Like I said, I really enjoy playing DDD, and possibly because he seems to have some issues. I actually feel like I have to think critically as I play, whereas a lot of characters I can just mindlessly go on the offensive. But let's see, what do you feel is the future of Project M? I know now at least all of the pre-planned characters or I don't even know. I don't want to speculate on if or when the extra 5 slots could or would be filled, but the character roster is, for all intents and purposes, finished. So I would think the next step would be like polish, right? Like balance and just fixing general things. But what do you feel like as a game, and then like just from a game mechanics point of view, and then like there is left to grow in the game, and then also I guess later we can talk about the future of Project M, like in the world of Smash as a whole.
Okay.
It's kind of a big question, sorry.
Let's see. Where do I start? Well, as for the near future of the game, I do think it is mostly just going to be character refinements, a lot of little aesthetic things, and I guess you could call it balance thinking, but a lot of the issues people have with aren't always necessarily balance. To give an example that I think most people pretty unanimously agree upon, people do not have fun with Zelda. They don't like playing as Zelda. They don't like playing against Zelda. It's not that she's broken per se. She just has a lot of attributes that people do not care for. They don't find it fun. They generally, at least, don't find it fun to play as. They find it dull to play against. So in a case like Zelda, it's not really ultimately a balance problem, because if you understand the character, it seems like a lot of the time you are still able to do well against her. But she's just not a character that people enjoy interacting with. So it seems like a lot of people tend to think her existence kind of hampers the whole Project M experience. So there are issues like that, where we might look into changing something not because it's too good, but because it's not entertaining to deal with. Then there are always balance concerns, and that's something that I feel like it's something we've not necessarily been good at in the really short term, but over time we eventually managed to get things right. Like, for example, 2.1 Sonic, people thought was kind of annoying to play against. This was before 2.5 when he was kind of crazy, but some people actually thought 2.1 Sonic wasn't that good if you know how to play against him. But in any case, he wasn't something that people had fun with. And that 2.1 also had a really crazy Ike, well, at least arguably crazy Ike. I know there were some people who still felt otherwise, but he could just like down air forward smash and kill you at 50% in the middle of Green Hill Zone or something.
Yeah.
So he kind of definitely was out there in some respects. And Lucario too. Lucario, I think, was actually probably the biggest defender of the three. Or at least my prediction would be that if 2.1 went on forever, Lucario would be the biggest defender of the newcomers, although you didn't see him as much as the others because he was trickier to play. And in 2.5, we kind of toned down Ike a lot, we toned down Lucario a lot, people stopped playing them, and we tried to revamp Sonic in a way that ended up making him kind of a disaster in a lot of ways. He's the most ridiculous character we've ever released. And so that was 2.5. 2.6, then 2.6 we did start to bring Ike and Lucario up a little bit. Like I think Ike has actually been in a pretty good place since 2.6.
I agree.
We toned down Sonic a lot, and tuned up Lucario a little bit. And in 3.0, then we again made it a little better after turning him down a little bit, and kind of revamped Lucario a little more. And now all three of those characters, I think, are actually in a pretty good place. With what was kind of what I was trying to get at ultimately, in that nowadays people seem to like where Sonic is. People like where Lucario is. They like where Ike is right now. So it's like we got a lot of little things wrong, but we eventually got it into a reasonable place.
Yeah.
So even if we necessarily haven't, in the very short term, been successful when it comes to character designs, it at least seems like, at least once if the characters are played by the public enough, we will eventually get things down to a reasonable level.
Yeah.
So I do feel like the game is headed in a good direction in that regard. I feel like really obnoxious or really good characters will eventually end up in a reasonable place. Maybe not immediately, but it seems like something that would happen at some point or another. I see the Snake mentions Ivysaur in the chat, and yeah, that's another character that kind of was in a questionable place in 2.6 that, at least from what I can gather, people seem to think is in a better place in 3.0. Like, I know SoCal's Ivysaur player, this guy named Machiavelli, seems to like where she is right now. What else? Really long term for Project M, that is very difficult to predict. I think a lot of it will depend on how Project M handles the release of Smash 4. And that's something that's, for me, it's kind of difficult to say. Like, there are some things we are pretty confident in. Like, in the case of Melee, we're pretty sure Melee is going to handle the release of Smash 4 well. That's not a concern. Melee players love Melee. We're going to keep playing it at this point. We've been playing it forever. We're going to not stop because of a new Smash game. Like, we survived Brawl, we can survive something else. Brawl, on the other hand, it seems like a lot of people think will be hit pretty harshly by it, because a lot of people just... There are obviously exceptions, but a lot of people, even amongst those who play it, have kind of mixed feelings towards the game. Although, all things considered, at the highest level, it seems pretty interesting, but the community as a whole does not seem overly in love with the game. And on top of that, Smash 4 seems like it is likely to be better than Brawl. We've at least heard some good things, such as the removal of tripping. Granted, it is possible that might not end up being the case, but you never know. It seems to me like the Brawl community would largely move on to Smash 4. But then Project M is in kind of this weird intermediate place where it has its own little scene that wanted a new game that's like Melee, but not like Brawl. And it's very difficult for me to predict how this community is going to react to the release of Smash 4. I could see some of them saying, okay, Project M was fun while this lasted, let's go to Smash 4. I could see some of them saying, I don't really care too much about Smash 4, I'm just going to keep playing Project M. And some people will probably be like, well, let's just play both, why not? And I really don't feel like I have enough information to accurately gauge how that's going to go down. My suspicion is Project M will still be around. If I had to guess, well, I mean, it'll still be around in one form or another, but whether it'll be around in a substantial form or another is the question. And my gut suspicion is that I kind of still expect it to have a scene. I feel like the current scene has become too big for it to just disappear from the face of the earth when the next Smash game comes out, because it does have its own fair share of pretty dedicated players. So that's my guess. My guess is it'll still be around in a reasonable form after Smash 4's release, but that is just a somewhat uneducated guess.
I'd agree, though. I feel like Project M, like, people are excited about mods. People are excited about fan-based games. And like you said, the Project M staff does have, like, you guys do have a good record for fixing any obvious mistakes and not, you know, overtly creating more mistakes in the process. And even if I've been frustrated with Project M in the recent past, I'm still very impressed with it, and I'm very hopeful in the next few months to see where it goes. Because, like I said, now that there's not so many things that you're trying to implement at the same time, you can kind of sit back and look at the whole picture and you know, change some fine details. So I'm very excited about the future of Project M personally. Let's see.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah. Actually, I was gonna ask what you felt the future of Melee looked like, because not so much in terms of will it survive Smash 4. We've already covered. We both, I think, agree that like that's not even going to be an issue. But what I am curious about is, will Melee continue to grow? Because at the moment, Melee is in a very interesting position where there's a huge fan base for Smash, for competitive Melee in particular, but it's kind of a nebulous entity, this community, because it only seems to show up whenever there's a huge tournament, and then, or if there's any particular cause, like the Evo fundraiser, like the documentary. I'm sure if Samix started a Kickstarter for another episode or two, he would make like $300,000 in the first day. I bet he would.
And he is making another episode.
Yeah, but I don't know if he's started a Kickstarter for it or an Indiegogo or anything like that. If he has, then I'm donating money for that. The man is amazing.
I think he's already set something up. I would check his Twitter page.
Okay.
Or if he hasn't yet, he plans on it.
Okay. Well, as soon as that happens, or if it already has, I'm donating money. But yeah, I just look around at other games that have become huge. I look at speedrunning has suddenly picked up, like in a really big kind of way. League of Legends, Dota, even Counter-Strike is doing very, very well lately. I have to wonder if Melee is the next game to follow suit. The FGC has been getting big. Can't believe I didn't mention that earlier. And I don't know. Like, the FGC has nothing but great things to say about Melee these days. And the FGC has monetized in ways and supports, like, for example, their content creators like Maximilian, their streamers who, they're professional players who are sponsored by real entities, financial entities, and they get flown to tournaments. Like, it's their job. Do you see this happening for Melee, or do we kind of just sit in this weird excitement?
There's a few pretty critical differences with Melee and a lot of the FGC games. One of them is that Nintendo doesn't really support Melee as a competitive game at all.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that even in the FGC, you tend to see people displaying the latest games a lot. Like, I'm sure Capcom definitely wants it to be that way. Like, okay, let's have everybody look at AE or Marvel or whatever people are playing these days. So, and in the case of Melee, I mean, even if Nintendo did say, okay, fine, let's have our little tournaments and support players, I don't think they would have too much incentive to glamorize Melee. They'd want, because ultimately, their business, they want to profit. They want to support the game that they actually have on the shelves out right now, which would be Smash 4. So I do think Melee, at least to an extent, will continue to be grassroots in quite a bit of ways. We do see things like MLG and Evo pop up from time to time, but ultimately I do feel like we're generally a community that sustains ourselves. So as for how that's going to handle the long term, I tend to be optimistic just because Melee has survived a lot of things in the past. We've been a very persistent and at times stubborn community. Like, for example, with the release of Brawl, a lot of people didn't even really... A bunch of Melee players just vanished after Brawl's release. In a lot of regions, Melee just became kind of small. I personally, even in late 2007, early 2008, at that time, I felt like it was too late for me to really get into Melee on a very substantial level. I was going for tournaments and stuff, but Brawl was my main focus for a while. I felt like, okay, maybe I missed my chance with Melee, maybe I'll go on to Brawl. And I still ended up going back to Melee. So, just based on my own experience with the community, we're a very persistent group of people. We very much like to continue playing this game. And just because of that, I feel like it's still going to be around on a reasonable level for quite some time. I'm sure growth will fluctuate, though. I mean, we'll have things like Evo in the documentary that'll bring in a ton of new people, and over time, a lot of these new people will just disappear due to a lack of long-term interest. But some will stick around. A lot of people who have already been around forever will continue to be around a long time. So, all things considered, I'm pretty optimistic about the future of Melee. I'd be surprised if it shrunk a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah. I do feel like one of my friends put it this way, is that Melee, especially before Evo, had a huge problem with gaining new members, but never had a problem with keeping new members. It's the joke now is nobody quits Smash. Nobody really quits. And yeah, like you said, we just keep coming back to it. It's just a fun game. At this point, if it's alright with you, I'd like to field questions from Twitch chat, which can be a dangerous proposition.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, I can just say I won't answer this.
Yeah. We usually will skip over quite a few of the questions in the past interviews whenever we've fielded questions. There was my favorite one that we definitely did not answer on camera was people wanted to know about the first time Scar smooched. Yeah. Everyone wanted to know about Smooch and Scar. Which did get answered.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Kissing. The first time he kissed a girl.
The first time Scar did?
Yeah.
I am thoroughly confused. Why are we talking about the first time Scar
That's what Twitch chat wanted to know. So this is the dangerous proposition of answering Twitch chat questions.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant somebody asked that earlier in this chat.
Oh, in this chat? No, but if you have that story, then you're more than welcome to.
I cannot claim to be that familiar with the intimate details of Scar's personal life, unfortunately.
Well, anyway, let's look and see if Twitch chat is caught up to the video by now. And if there are any questions that they're looking to say. Who is the one player you regret never getting to play?
I was always a really big fan of Azen. So, in a way, it's kind of unfortunate that I never got to play him. Amsa too, as in the European Amsa from the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
Big fan of his too. Like I used to say, like my two favorite Smash players were Azen and Amsa. Never got to play either of them. Azen's kind of just disappeared forever. Amsa's been sick, but apparently he's getting better again, though.
Oh, that's
and
good.
He's still rusty, but it looks like he's getting back in shape. I heard he took a set off of ice a while ago, so that's cool. It'd be fun to play him someday.
Yeah. Alright, another question. As #1 in SoCal, how would you feel about Mewtwo King, Mango, and Hungrybox coming over? I'm guessing to live there. And
that'd be cool. More good players to practice with.
Yeah. Let's see.
I don't really care about the number. The #1 thing, that means absolutely nothing to me. It's just one way of yielding an ordered list happened to yield me as #1. Okay, that's fairly irrelevant. It's fairly irrelevant to reality, all things considered, so I don't really care about that. If 3 people who are very obviously better than me want to come to SoCal, then sure, I don't care.
Alright. Another question. Who do you think are the top characters in Project M, and who are the bottom characters, in your opinion?
That is a very difficult question to answer, because the metagame, all things considered, is not very thoroughly developed for that game. So I really have very little sense of what a lot of the characters are capable of doing. I mean, my default inclinations would be, let's see, top characters, Fox, he's just too versatile not to be good in essentially any environment. Meta Knight, it's really versatile too. Who else is there?
I'm not sure who else really stands out to me. I guess just Sheik is still amazing.
Yeah.
Peach goes under the radar a lot, but Peach is still amazing.
Peach only got buffed, pretty much.
Yes, that is accurate.
So, yeah, I've always wondered why nobody's playing Peach. I guess there are just a lot of other characters to play.
I'm sure there's others that I'm forgetting.
Yeah.
I don't really have any answer for worst because they're bad. I feel like a lot of characters that are bad likely just don't have much of a metagame developed for them. Which I guess is kind of true for everything, but probably especially them.
Right.
It's difficult to say.
Next question. Why are people struggling to pick up Project M Ice Climbers? I never played Melee Ice Climbers, so I can't relate. I guess just instantly jump into the PM Ice Climbers. Or no, I guess this is a PM Ice Climbers main, and he's wondering why nobody is playing PM Ice Climbers.
Well, Ice Climbers and Melee are a very complicated character in a lot of ways. Not even necessarily in terms of how difficult they are to play, but just in terms of how they function. There are lots of very little details that are very difficult to accurately recreate in Project M. And also there are just lots of other little differences, such as how do I want to say this? Timing for the handoffs are pretty different, for one thing. So that's not something that's going to translate well. Then there are things like the Ice Climbers wave dash being a little shorter. There's a few kind of peculiar things, like if you want to have Nana charge a forward smash backwards, she's still going to do it in the direction you were facing. What else? I know Chew doesn't like that Blizzard doesn't lock people in grabs, although that's just due to a general difference in grab mechanics. You can break out of grab damage animations, whereas you can't in Melee, so Blizzard won't lock people in grabs. There's some other little things. Some hitboxes just feel a little off to people. Nana's AI is different, which is confusing to a lot of people. So just generally speaking, it's not a character that I think a lot of Melee Ice Climbers players really have all that much interest in. Or when they try it, they generally are thrown off by the little things. And just in general, I mean, I probably would, if I did have to recommend a character to a Melee Ice Climbers player, I'd probably pick somebody different, just for the sake of not getting too different, but still overall similar versions of the same character mixed up with each other. So you probably will just have to see a lot of new faces develop Project M Ice Climbers. I know Chew plays Project M Ice Climbers, but he does a lot of things that are kind of questionable. He just plays them like Melee Ice Climbers.
Yeah.
In some ways that's good, in some ways it's not. So I don't know. All things considered, I still think Project M Ice Climbers are in a good place. I still think they're a really good character, even if they're not necessarily very easy to translate from Melee Ice Climbers. I think they have a lot of really good tools at their disposal. So I do have a pretty high opinion of Project M Ice Climbers as a character. I just wouldn't really recommend that Melee Ice Climbers players dabble in them, just because they are pretty substantially different.
Yeah. Let's see. Is it true the PMBR are adding brand new characters for future updates? I know there are the 5 slots available, and as far as I know, there's not been any official statement.
I think we're still waiting on any sort of official statement.
Okay.
And so yeah, for the time being, the public relations answer is just no comment.
Okay. That's fine. I mean, this is my own speculation, but it seems that the number of times it's been thrown out that there are 4 or 5 more slots available, it seems very likely. So that would be my non-PMBR answer. Unofficial, nothing to do with the PM backroom. I personally think chances are good.
It's reasonable speculation.
Yeah. Let's see. Where does the SILA tag come from?
Sila, that comes from an Inuit deity that has several different names. The most common one that people in the States... The most common name for that deity in the States is Silip Anua. I'll type that in the chat.
All right.
And that is... Descriptions of the deity vary, but is essentially a weather deity. At the same time, it's also considered the main component of everything exists. So it's simultaneously
what everything is ultimately made of, and it's also something that governs the weather. And Sela, just the 4 letters, is one of the shorter names for the deity. So, yeah.
It's interesting.
It has some other names too, like Hilla is another name, Hilla, but that wouldn't fit. Scylla with 2 L's is more common than it is with 1 L also.
That's interesting. Do you happen to be religious, or do you just...
No, not at all.
Okay.
I guess you could say I'm casually interested in religion. I like to see why people believe the things they do, but I don't subscribe to any religion.
That's fair. Another question, why DDD? Why main DDD? Why take such an interest in the character?
In some ways, that's kind of hard for me to answer, actually. When I started playing Project M in 2011, I was pretty sure I was going to be a Pit main, just because a lot of the time I'll just like fast zoning characters, and Pit fit that very, very well.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when I got in the background, I also said, okay, well, I better work on a bunch of other characters. I mean, since then, nowadays, I don't really even focus on that many, but at the time, I wanted to get feedback on a bunch of characters. So it's like, okay, let's look at some potential secondaries. So I had a Rob, I had a Ness. I looked into the DDD because I said, well, I kind of liked how he was in Brawl. There were some things that struck me as not so nice about the character. Like, why was he in the Z-axis during his spot jump so much? The chain grabs were kind of silly. But outside of that, I thought he just had kind of a cool movement style. Thought he was reasonably fun to play and kind of interesting. So I said, okay, I'll just dabble in this character a little bit. I really enjoyed the way he moved. It was very foreign from what I was used to in Melee. Like, half the reason I enjoy Project M is that I can treat it as a very new experience for Melee. I've been playing Melee forever, so I want to get something new out of this game, so I'll pick a very different character. And since DD, I've never really played with kind of sluggish heavyweights that much, so playing around with DD was a very interesting experience for me. And over time, probably over the period of about a couple months, I started doing better with DD than when I did with Pit overall. Like, I would do really badly with Pit against, say, Foxes. I would just die vertically all the time, but it's a matchup I could handle with DDD. And I felt I had relatively fewer matchup weaknesses with DDD. And over time, I just enjoyed the character more. So, yeah, that's essentially why I do DDD in Project M.
Okay. Let's see. What is, in your opinion, the highest potential character in Project M at the moment? Would you say it's Peach, or is there another character that comes to mind when you hear the word potential?
If you're talking in terms of who do I anticipate being the best character in the long run, I'm still inclined to say Fox just because of how versatile he is. It's not something I feel too strongly on. As long as there's a reasonable number of good characters, I don't really care who's the best. It's not a question that really is terribly important. But I guess if I had to give one reason for singling out Fox, it's just that he's a really versatile character. There's a lot of things in Project M. There's lots of really different things you have to deal with in Project M. And Fox just has so many good attributes that let him deal with all of these things. Like, he has a really good initial dash, he has a really good run, he has a 3-frame jump squat, he rises really quickly when he jumps, he has a really good normal fast fall and really good fast fall acceleration, he has a low short hop. He just has really, really good physics, and on top of that, he has a solid moveset. So just whatever weird thing you throw at him, it seems like he's able to construct an answer to it. So that's why I'd probably still say Fox.
All right. Let's see. Next question is, what's the one thing you should know when you're stuck with SoPo?
You can afford to dash dance a lot more with SoPo than you can with 2 Ice Climbers. Nana can't pivot on her own, so if you try to dash dance around a lot, you're just going to desync the Ice Climbers, which does have its uses. For example, it leads to a very good Blizzard desync, but you can't really... With synced Ice Climbers, you can't really effectively use dash dancing the same way you can with other characters, because you're just going to make Nana trip up and she might get hit. With Popo, you don't have that liability, and Popo actually has a pretty good dash dance, all things considered. So that's one thing to be aware of. Knowing how to punish out of grabs is also a little
important. Like, you're going to need to rely on a lot more tech chases with down throw and back throw. On some characters, you can just combo with up throw. And, yeah, I would say understand how to punish out of grabs differently and dash dance more. That would be it in a nutshell. Outside of that, themes aren't too different. Projectiles are worse. Like, Popo's Blizzard on its own isn't that great, while Nana's Blizzard is amazing. And I guess Ice Block's not too different, although it's definitely a little worse. You do lose access to a lot of tools with Nana, but still a lot of things are going to be surprisingly similar. Like, a lot of the just basic up air juggles and things like that still work essentially the same way they do with Popo as they do with Nana. They might not be as good just because it does less damage, and it might be harder to make some strings connect since you don't have another second version of the attack hitting 6 frames afterwards. But it's not too different. I guess you also... Oh, one more thing. You need to, generally speaking, be a little more cautious about grabs. Like, let's see... The case... Sheik's a good example, because Sheik essentially can't do anything safe out of a grab on shielding Ice Climbers. Like, even if you grab Popo and down throw Popo with Sheik, you can just tell Nana to shield grab it. And sometimes Nana will down throw on her own, and then you can actually convert that into a chain grab. Whereas if you're, say, Popo against Sheik, then Sheik's grab game is as good as it is against any other character, essentially.
Yeah.
So you start need to looking out for that. Maybe spot dodge a little more.
All right.
I guess that's the gist of that.
There seems to be only one more question that people have thrown out, and that's what is your opinion on Ness's PK Fire exploding on Shield? There was a huge discussion you may have seen in the Twitch chat about PK Fire.
I saw it on and off, but I wasn't really paying too much attention to it. It's honestly not something I feel too strongly about either way, just because you can really easily just buffer a roll out of it. I mean, all things considered, I do like it when the pillar activates on the shield. I did like the fire pillar being active. I don't really see much reason for that not to be the case. But I guess that would be my preference, but I feel like ultimately it's not going to be much of a deal breaker because you can just very easily escape PK Fire. I mean, even if PK Fire hits you, you can just smash GI down, shield, and roll away. You can smash GI away and up and get out. I feel like it's a move that, as players get better, in particular as they get better at smash GI, and also just buffering options out of shield, it becomes less useful. Still definitely good, all things considered, though, just because of its low landing lag.
Alright. This is my own question. I'm not sure, because I don't keep up with Project M that much, and the like what is known and what isn't, but Mario's cape totally hits through shields. Like, completely ignores shields. Is this...
This is something that's actually difficult to code around.
Huh.
So, I mean, there has been talk of doing things with how Mario's cape interacts with the shield, but I think part of the challenge is just coding it to work the way we want it to.
Okay.
Whatever that ends up being.
Yeah. There was one more. Schwal asks, and I'm not sure, I'm assuming he's asking you, have you ever thought of doing match analysis of yourself as a video for others to watch and learn? You're pretty clear on what you're doing, what you should have done, why, and this would be a great tool for helping newer players learn, like what to look for.
It's something I would be open to. I generally don't really enjoy watching myself play nowadays, but it's something that if other people would be interested in seeing, I could just do that on my YouTube channel or my Twitch channel.
Okay.
Probably Twitch, since that seems to be the theme these days.